Hello. I am really eager to explore a particular issue with you, a problem solving kind of situation around sleep. I am going to take a scenario, break it down into the steps that may help support you through a sleep challenge, and then put it back together again within the context of bad habits versus developmental needs. So, let's get started. So, let's talk about what happens when babies who have been sleeping okay or great suddenly start waking up regularly through the night. So, at 12 months old, all of a sudden they're waking up at 3 hour marks through the entire night, and you're left wondering, what the heck is happening? And two, do we need to sleep train to get through this? And three, what the heck is happening? And you're tired and you're cranky and you're confused about what's happening and what to do about it. So, I'm going to break it down into three parts that follow the framework that I gave in earlier videos around supporting sleep: solving, supporting, and self care. So, with solving, the first step, and this applies to any scenario, but we're going to apply it to a 1 year old who's waking up every 3 hours, almost to the minute. You could time your watch by it. First, you're solving the sleep challenge. Is there something underlying that's waking them up? The big culprits, the easy ones that we turn to, are things like teething, a growth spurt that's waking them up and they're hungry, separation anxiety, which at this age is still ramping up and is still an issue. Stress. Have there been any changes lately, either changes in your family rhythm or routine, or changes in things happening outside your home that inevitably affect you and your nervous system, which can increase stress for your baby? And also developmental stress or change or transition. So the new skills that are emerging or on the verge of emerging. All of these things can interrupt a still immature yet developing sleep cycle and sleep maturity for a baby. So, even though sleep looks different, and even though we can look at sleep cycles as being more consistent and longer, and circadian rhythm is well established, all of these things can still impact a relatively immature sleep system. So, at the 3 month mark, or sorry, the 3 hour mark, of course, that is pretty much one nice long sleep cycle. So you'll look back at earlier times and know that it was a 45-minute mark because there is a little dip. The sleep cycles were short. Now they're like 3 hours long, which is great, but they're coming out of that sleep cycle interrupted by any number of things that could be happening, and then having trouble falling back asleep on their own after that. I'll point out that the expectation generally is that babies are going to be self soothing back to sleep at the 3 hour mark. But we know from research that 12-month-olds, only about half of them have that ability to self soothe. It's not a character flaw, it's not a developmental quandary that you need to solve. It's simply the reality that some babies develop that skill earlier than others. Certainly, your ongoing support in helping them feel safe and secure, in having good sleep hygiene. So, generally, a predictable environment and a predictable routine or rhythm, not rigid schedule, but predictable and comforting and expected and anticipated, can all help with keeping that everything calm, but it doesn't solve everything. So, one of the other things that you can look for at this age when it comes to solving is looking at new sleep cues that tell you that they're getting tired earlier. Because, of course, with that 3 hour sleep cycle, if they are overtired or undertired, they're going to wake up after 3 hours either feeling restless and needing support, or feeling well rested and needing to have a party in the middle of the night. So that's the first step, is solving. It won't solve everything, of course, because some of those things are out of our control. Some of them are short term. Some of them take a lot longer, like developmental shifts or anxiety or stress that's coming from inside or outside the home. And keep in mind too, we are social beings. We're very sensitive to stress. So it's not that things have to be bad stress, but any change. It could be a household move or starting a new job, both of which are very exciting. It could be that parents are switching their roles, and the parent that was working outside the home is now at home and the other parent has now returned to work. it is still a stress, a shift, a transition, a change that can impact stress at home. So look for those changes and know that even if those changes are welcome, they can have an impact on sleep. So we haven't like waved a magic wand though and solved the sleep problem and all of a sudden they're sleeping through. It just allows you to understand potentially why this is happening now. And some of the ones that do tend to get forgotten about are growth spurts, where feeding would be increasing as well. Often, when there is something that's causing sleep challenges, you'll see it impacting daytime sleep as well. If it's only impacting night, then it would be worthwhile looking at what the sleep routine is during the day. Maybe naps need to be tweaked a little bit carefully and consciously around either shortening or lengthening or moving naps around just a little bit to see if we can get those nice longer wake periods that 12-month-olds are generally ready for. So if they aren't wake for a longer period of time, then see if their sleep cues are letting you know that they're not quite ready for a nap, even if they're going down relatively easily. Spread that wake time a little bit later and see what happens. The second step, after solving or looking at what the root cause of these wake ups are, is supporting your baby through sleep. Of course, this goes back to feeling calm and reassured and having a consistent routine, but there are some specific strategies that can work as well. Of course, I'm always big on accessing nature and outdoors and sunshine as much as possible whenever there's a sleep challenge. Well, always, but in particular, it's worth reevaluating when there's a sleep challenge. Whenever there's disruption or grumpiness or challenges, I say either add sunshine or add water. So spending time during the day in active play, oftentimes that's nice and easy in water, because if babies are grumpy, they sometimes light up and have a great time in the tub. So nature time and water are two really easy ways to support their daytime that can help with nighttime sleep. I'll also suggest that regardless of where babies are, if they're not in bed with you in your room, if they're in a crib in their own room, to consider putting a floor mattress on the floor in their room, with one of two options available to you in general with that. The first is to bed share with them through this period, but the crib is still right there and available to them for at least part of the night, or use the floor mattress just for you to camp out. There are other resources on camping out in the room. My only caveat would be when babies are upset and need your support, sometimes it can work very well to be that close. Other times it drives them batty that you're next to them, but not actually taking them out of the crib to comfort them. Other things that you can do to support sleep at this age is to respond to with key sleep associations that you've already been building through your sleep routines and through looking at all the sensory things that you can put into play to support the feeling or invitation of sleep. So we're looking at smell, we're looking at sound, using your voice for shush, 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 shushing, not to tell them to shush, but as a comforting sound that they get used to knowing that you're there and that they can fall asleep again. Sometimes it's physical, putting your hand firmly on their chest or their back. Sometimes just that firm pressure is enough with your voice. Other times babies really like the pat or the rub. It really depends on temperament. Nursing to sleep, even though some literature will say babies don't need to feed at this age, we do have growth spurts, and we do have an acknowledgement through anthropological studies that comfort isn't just about calories. So feeding may be something that you end up realizing that they still need. This isn't the age to wean. This is the age to stay consistent with some of those sleep supports, or even look at reevaluating and increasing them. Also, I'll add, in terms of support, and this is an age where language is starting to come out. Babies often have a few words, mama, dada, and one other word. If they're saying 3 words, they understand far more than that. And we sometimes aren't yet at this age in the habit of using our voice to help our children understand what's expected. But you can start using very, very simple, short, I call them mantras, because they need to be easy to repeat. They need to be easy to say when you're tired. They need to be meaningful and really pack a lot in a very, very short phrase that you can repeat in a whisper or without much effort when you're lying, either camping out next to them while they're in the crib or with them in bed. And it could be shush, shush, time to sleep, or shush, shush, mama's here, or something very simple and repetitive that lets them know they're safe, they're loved, and it's sleep time. And it can work very well. The reason I suggest words is because, again, up until now, receptive language isn't great, right? They understand some, but not a lot. We tend to underestimate that this is an age where we can start using words to help them transition to something new or to help support them with something they're having trouble with. So I would try words as well. Um, Other strategies to support at this age would be to tweak the naps. So take a look at how long that wake period is. Does it need to be longer? Are you putting them down a little bit earlier than they need to be? And they just don't have the sleep pressure. So they're waking up with enough topped up in the middle of the night to wake up every 3 hours, not be tired enough to roll over and fall asleep, which is really the goal, that ability to come out of a sleep cycle, roll over and fall back asleep because you feel safe and you feel tired. So tweaking the naps can help with that, and lengthening the wake time can help as well. Sometimes it's the opposite. They're overtired. It's not that they don't have enough sleep pressure, it's that they're exhausted and have too much sleep pressure. And that creates a restless situation where they may be waking up more frequently. When they're waking up consistently at the 3 hour mark, it's less likely, but it's something worth looking at. And it's easy to change, either by exploring whether an earlier bedtime makes sense, exploring whether they're getting enough sleep during the day with naps. Like, are you getting a bit busier? Is the routine different because they're now at daycare, or you're seeing more involved in more programs outside the home, or anything like that that could have interrupted the balance that you had? And so things can be revisited to see if you can optimize daytime sleep. Again, this is not an age to change anything significant. It's all about exploring where can you shift things subtly to help support sleep so that they're hopefully consolidating. And the goal would be to try to see if you can tweak things gently enough to get them past the 12 p.m. or 12 a.m., the midnight point. Because once you get to that kind of milestone or that kind of marker on the clock, you've got a reasonably long stretch. You may not get there right away, but that's kind of something that you'll see creep a little bit later and later. Or you'll see it leap too, well beyond the 3 month or the 3 hour mark. Okay, the third suggestion, the one that parents either love because it gives them permission to focus on something that they can actually do when development and sleep development is not going as expected, and that is self-care. Or parents, the alternative is parents hate it because it doesn't feel like a solution. But when we look at development of sleep over millennia and through different cultures, we know that sleep generally leads to more consolidated sleep, longer sleep cycles, and more independent sleep over time. And yet we hit these snags and these hurdles that throw us for a loop, and we all of a sudden want to go into fix it mode. So self-care is a reverse look at this to see what can we do to shore up our own sleep so that we can manage through this blip or this glitch in sleep right now that's giving us a challenge. It may not be bothering our children at all. They may be doing quite well and not overtired with waking every 3 hours. The key would be to look at how long the wake up period is at the 3 hour mark. How quickly can they be comforted back to sleep? If they're awake for hours, we want to dig a little deeper. But what self-care can you do to support yourself through this really challenging time? And I was just asking my husband, do you remember when our kids were waking up every 3 hours? And he said it was kind of all a blur. He can't remember the particular details, but I'm sure there was a period of time where this was a challenge. But time does tend to soften the memories a bit. But one strategy is to go to bed early. I know this is not a favorite for a lot of people. It takes a little bit of wrapping your head around the idea that going to bed early is self-care. It's probably worth more than a dozen roses to you, or more than, a glass of wine and candlelight, maybe. And it certainly will make you feel better in the long run for those things, and maybe even give you energy to do those things, to stay up and have a glass of wine at some point. with a candlelight at the table to make a nice special evening, but not every night. This is about you going to bed early and catching up on some of the sleep debt that you have, especially if you know that your baby is waking up in 3-hour increments. Go to bed when they do, and you'll have pretty much 3 hours of sleep if you're able to fall asleep fairly quickly. Even if you are not able to fall asleep quickly because you're used to going to bed later and our bodies don't seem to adjust very well unless we're exhausted in going to bed more than half an hour earlier than the night before, you're at least in bed, bring in a podcast or and some herbal tea and an audiobook or a book that you're reading, and just relax in bed with the covers pulled up and enjoy some quiet time in that window. The challenge is if you know it's 3 hours and you don't go to bed or you aren't in bed, then at some point it's 2 hours until you're expecting them to wake up, and then an hour and a half, and then an hour. And by then you think there's no point in going to bed. They're going to wake up in half an hour anyway. And you've missed an opportunity for a whole sleep cycle for you. So go to bed early. This is not the time to night wean, even if it may be tempting to see if that will improve sleep. At this age, that kind of change is probably counterproductive. They may be going through a growth spurt, so it maybe feed them more, offer the breast more. If you've been doing more of a don't offer, don't refuse, offer it more. Also do what works. Do what works to get the sleep. Don't fight it and try to make something happen that isn't going to happen smoothly, because then you're tired and working your butt off and still not getting anywhere. And then you're frustrated as well. Frustrated with the failed attempts, in addition to frustrated with the wake ups. And the last piece of advice around the self-care piece is find support for you. Now, I know that support is looking very different this year than other years in terms of what's available to you, who is comfortable coming to support you in sleeping in the morning or in allowing you to have some self-care time or just downtime. But even when you're negotiating with your partner around tag teaming with sleep or having periods or alternating days where you're the one that gets to stay in bed and not get up right away, and then the next day you switch, can really do wonders in just giving you the stamina to get through a sleep challenge. Those are the three main strategies, but I'll finish off by talking a bit about bad habits versus needs. So we do have this tendency to look at sleep and say, well, if they're waking up that regularly on the clock, this must be a bad habit. But I'd like you to look at it a little differently and look at, what about needs? If they're waking up at every 3 hours, and you know that in general, you've been a responsive parent who has met their needs, provided security and safety for them, and nurturing and attention and being present, and they're waking up every 3 hours, we know for a baby like that, especially if you've ruled out underlying causes for the disruption, sleep feels good. Sleep is comforting. Sleep is restorative. Sleep is not an awful thing for them. So if they could sleep through that or bridge that transition from one sleep cycle to another, they would. And for some reason, their sleep is being interrupted and they're not able to go back to sleep on their own without support. So I don't look at that as being a habit. I look at that as being immature sleep in a baby who's generally had good invitations for sleep and a good environment for sleep. So looking at over or under tired can be really helpful. But aside from that, this is still immature sleep cycles that are still being bridged. In addition to that, it could be that they were sleeping past that 3-hour mark. This is new. It means something else is interrupting it. That's not a habit. That's an interruption of sleep, and it's riding through with solving it, supporting it, and then self-care. So that's it in a very big nutshell, but hopefully those give you some strategies to look at this a little differently. I'll finish off by saying, in the context of sleep support and sleep education versus sleep training, there is no smoking gun in terms of what does sleep training do in terms of the attachment and damage and breaking of secure attachment. Some children may do well if parents choose to sleep train at this age. but we don't know enough to know which children may really be thrown off kilter by that. It comes down, I think, to temperament and genetics around what babies need the intense support. And in general, I think that, in my view, that means supporting them as best we can, unless things are not resolvable to the point of tolerance through solving, supporting, and self-care. So hope that helps. I welcome your questions on this and to explore this a little bit more. I know it's semi-specific to this scenario, but it's also in some ways overly general as well. So let me know. I welcome your thoughts. And bye for now.